Bold Bytes, your bite-sized guide to payments.
Today, we're going to be discussing how to make the payments ecosystem work for you. So, the reason this specific topic is so important is that a lot of times the process that's in place, either people don't really know about or they are just kind of assuming that it's there to make a nuisance or it's something that they can just pretend doesn't actually exist so that we can all move forward together. And unfortunately, because the process is in place, it's there for a reason. And everybody that is involved with the process has now implemented their own ways of being a part of that process. And so by taking the initiative to adjust and move out of the system that we've already put in place, it does actually make the life of our partners, the resellers, the ISOs, and even the merchants a little bit harder to deal with because they're expecting something that can't actually be provided. And so I wanted to meet with you all to just kind of give you a little bit of an insight from the ISO perspective on how utilizing the processes that are in place can actually make your life easier. And then that way there would be less frustration moving forward. So we're going to go through a few different things, onboarding, account maintenance, file builds, and just kind of touch on certain areas where if you keep it in mind from the beginning, it might actually work out better for you in the long run. Now, what you will see basically across the board and a very large theme of the industry is that rushing is an exception, not the rule. So if every single thing that is being submitted by every single partner and every single merchant is in need of an emergency rush or an escalation, basically all that does is put everything into an emergency situation, and nothing officially is an emergency because now we're dealing with too many red alarms that are going off. So what you'll notice in every circumstance is that when you go to rush something, you actually are pulling it out of the normal process and the normal queue, and either attaching a little bit more scrutiny to it or making it a more manual process. So now it's becoming something where it's not just going to go through the step 1 through 5 and then get it done. Now there's going to be multiple teams touching it. There's going to be more demand from every department, and you're really taking the emphasis off of a true emergency. So what we suggest is that you really follow certain aspects in order to make sure that if an emergency needs to be rushed, we can actually take control of that and put the pressure on our processors and our internal teams to make it happen when it's necessary to do so. So 4 main areas that I would say are a good, true, valid reason for rushing something would be fraud. So a merchant's account has been a victim of card testing, or their bank account has gotten unauthorized access and we need to put the account on a funding hold in order to protect their money, things of that nature. That's a great time for when you should be requesting a rush, because we want to keep their merchant's account safe, right? We want to keep their money in a place where we know we can access it and get it back to them specifically, not a bad actor. Another time would be if a merchant their processing is down, right? Maybe their VAR sheet completely stopped working, or their device got tampered and we need to get a new file build set up. Something along those lines is a great reason, because again, we're taking the money out of the merchant's pocket and we want to make sure that we're getting them back up and running. Because if a merchant's not processing, then no one's making any money, right? And we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So that's a great example. Those are 2 great examples of when we should be implementing a rush situation. Now, mistakes happen, right? There are times where a request is made and not followed through on, or the piece of the request that that is in need was missed in the communication or things of that nature. And if we make a mistake, we are 100% going to make sure that we make it right. And we will rush and escalate something to make sure that we're doing right by you all and your merchants. And same thing goes with you. So if you come to us and you say, look, the merchant reached out to me and asked me for this, and I'm going to be completely honest, I missed the email, something happened, what have you, we're happy to make adjustments in those circumstances and put a rush request in because we're a partnership, right? So if we want you to succeed, then we're going to do what we can to make that happen. And so in circumstances like that, feel free to be as vulnerable as you need to be in order to make sure that we're going on the right track together. But these are circumstances where a human is a human, right? People make mistakes. And that is one of our core values here at VersiTech, is that we are all human. So we understand that we're not perfect, you're not perfect. And if there's something that needs to be done because of that circumstance, we are here to help, right? So definitely keep that in mind moving forward with any type of rush requests. Now I'm going to go through the separate topics just so that we're kind of on the same page for all the different areas. So for onboarding, again, rushing applications, basically this takes that merchant out of the queue. So now all of a sudden a application that could have very easily been auto approved, or it has very simple parameters that are just going to go through the normal onboarding process. By rushing it, you're actually pulling it out and putting it in the hands of somebody else. So now they're the ones that are going to have to manually make sure that they're reviewing the account, processing it through, onboarding them. And then there's other parts that they have to onboard as well. So for instance, with priority payment systems, they have to separately onboard the merchant onto MX Merchant because it gets taken out of that automation that will allow it to just complete itself during the onboarding process, as well as some back-end setup. So there are some times where we rush a merchant account to be boarded, and then you'll notice it kind of takes a little longer to get a VAR sheet from the equipment tab. And that's because that process has not been completed yet. So now you've rushed the application, but the actual thing that's necessary, which is the VAR sheet that you're needing, you can't pull it from the automatic equipment tab. You have to submit for it now because now it has to go through that secondary manual process to be onboarded on the back end. So these are circumstances where it's a ripple effect, right? If you rush one side, it's just going to kind of keep messing things up along the end. Allowing adequate time. So we recommend at least 1 week in between an application submission and a go live installation. So we see it all the time. A partner reaches out and says, hey, we have someone who's going live tomorrow. I need this application rushed, and I need the VAR sheet taken care of and the file build and the equipment sent overnight. And I'm sure there are some circumstances where that type of rushing will definitely come into play. I think for the most part, we can all agree that there is a ability to have an extended amount of time, even a week, right? So if it's to a point where you legitimately are going to lose a sale because they want to go live tomorrow, that might be a situation where you might want to figure out whether or not that relationship is good for you in the long run, or understand that if you are able to say, look, I can get you onboarded in a week, that's what I can do. If you're interested, let's do it. If not, then this isn't the relationship for us. And kind of pull the control back in your hands so that we're not putting that strain on then the underwriting team, the file build team, the hardware team, basically sending every single part of that process for onboarding the merchant into chaos. And more than likely, it's not going to be set up for success. And more than likely, that hardware is not going to show up by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning when they open. They're not going to be set up for success. There could be a problem with the VAR sheet because of the way it was onboarded and rushed through underwriting. So give yourself at least a week. That's what we would recommend, just to allow some time for mishaps, right? For something to go wrong. You can always show up early with it, but you can't take back time if you've promised a 12-hour turnaround. So submitting complete documentation. So for certain accounts that are being onboarded, their parameters and their way of running their business is very simple. There's not much left to the imagination. But in other circumstances where maybe they do a lot of large parties or catering, or they have a specific way of doing their non-delivery exposure. So, maybe they take deposits and then they take full payment on the day of the event and things of that nature. Providing a business narrative or example invoices beforehand and during underwriting will help the process of making sure that the account doesn't get pended or that we don't have any risk reviews later on. So helping with that process in the beginning will definitely help with any issues that might come up during an onboarding process. And then communicating PCI compliance. So we see this a lot across basically all of our partners, all of our company, even direct merchants, where the merchant just does not know that PCI compliance is a thing, let alone something that's their responsibility. So allowing, we'll send out, when we send out the notification or the initial access to MX Merchant during onboarding, that's an automated process. So a merchant will automatically get that email for whatever email is on file. But the process of actually going into MX Merchant and getting their PCI compliance registered and actually going through the SAQ or the scan, in those circumstances, they don't know that that's a next step. So when they start receiving a non-compliant fee 3 months into their processing, they're upset because they want to know why no one told them. And I would definitely recommend, as the main point of contact and the initial touch point for your merchants, just give them a heads up ahead of time. Let them know that PCI compliance is a thing, that it is something they have to take care of once a year. If they have an IP address, they have to do a scan once a quarter, and just kind of get the information out there so that they're not surprised at the end and you're not having to deal with a unfortunate situation once that fee starts coming through. For file builds, when a merchant is down, unable to process, 100%. Rushing that request is something that we take very seriously. We want to make sure you're back up and running as quickly as possible. And submitting a file build request by, if it's a merchant that's already been processing and just kind of saying like, hey, I need another bar sheet that matches the last one that we had. We have cases that have been submitted. We have the ability to look that information back up. But when you're just kind of submitting an initial file build request, the best course of action that we have put into place, it's a process that is basically using an online template through our website. If you go to our boldpay.io website and go to the resources support, you'll be able to put in a case for hardware, file builds, gateway setups, data cap setups, things of that nature. And by utilizing that template, you are actually able to hit the points that we really need on our end in order to make sure that your file build is done correctly. So we have had partners in the past where it is a very intricate situation that they're looking for, and they have their own template that they send in via email to make sure that each point is covered. And that's great too. As long as each section that is looking for the connection type, whether or not you need server numbers, tips, whatever the case may be, these are things that are needed to be known in order to make sure that the file build is a successful completion at the very beginning, so that you are not having to come back and forth several times in order to get what it is that you're looking for. Including certain parts of the file build that you might not think are very important, but knowing about this stuff ahead of time for your setups, for your merchant setups, will help in the long run. So whether or not the merchant needs voltage, if they're going to be implementing or integrating with data cap, whether or not they need a host capture time, if they have PIN debit, EBT, things of that nature. Even just the type of device. So when we submit requests into the processor, we do have to let them know what kind of device is planning to be set up so that if there is something different that needs to happen on the back end, they can help with that. So utilizing that or providing that information from the beginning definitely helps the process become a little smoother. And sometimes rushing is not a possibility. So with First Data, they have a 24-hour life cycle. So any change, any account change, any file builds, even the change of a bank account or the release of funds for a funding hold, it has to cycle overnight. They basically have to let the change or any difference that they made to the account cycle for 24 hours, and then they can implement the rest of it. So in some circumstances, you can't get it in the next hour or two because it has to go for 24 hours. We used to see this a lot. Luckily, since we've started having a First Data North backend, we haven't seen this as much, but there are still circumstances where a First Data North file build on a Omaha backend actually is a 5-day return process. There is no way to rush that. It is going to be 5 business days. And that's putting everybody in a circumstance. If you let somebody know they're going to be onboarded tomorrow, start processing on their new equipment tomorrow, and then they're on a First Data North file build with an Omaha backend, and then in 5 business days, we're actually able to deliver that request. So these are things to keep in mind, especially in the file build time. Account maintenance. So bank changes face extreme scrutiny when rushed because you're now asking a team to quickly validate banking information for a merchant to put on file to have their funding be directed to and their fees be directed to. And there have been circumstances where there is a fraudulent person, or let's say the ex of a merchant owner that has reached out and wants to fraudulently take over that bank account and submits the banking documentation. It all matches the business name and the business information, but the signature is a little off. It's one of the owners and not the other owner. And they end up getting the bank account changed fraudulently. And there are circumstances that happen that way. So the process that's in place for bank changes is very specific to make sure that the merchant's money stays safe. So trying to rush that and pushing it out of the queue, now you're going to have people really going over that signature with a fine-tooth comb, really making sure that that Guy Act comes back with the accurate information, ensuring that all of the pieces are in place, as opposed to the normal process where they're going to just business as usual. They're going to look through everything as they need to, and it's going to remain in that queue, as opposed to being pulled out and put in front of something else that is now going to want to, why are we rushing this? I want to make sure that all of this information is accurate. And so making sure that you're just kind of letting the process be, unless it's a situation of fraud or we haven't gotten the account on a funding hold yet, or whatever the case may be. There are circumstances where it is necessary, but definitely using that when it's necessary and not just for every bank change would definitely help out everybody. External rekey. So this is going to be a rekey. I'm sure all of you have experienced it at some point, but it's going to be about 50 transactions or more that we actually have to submit to the processor to have happen, just based on the resources that it takes up. So in these circumstances, there is a rekey authorization form that has very specific what the batch total is planning to be, how many transactions they are, what's the reason behind it. Why are we having to rekey this? Was it a faulty terminal that didn't batch for months? Is it that it just got tampered and now we have an open batch from the last couple of days? So there's a lot of variables that go into it that then lead to further chargebacks, more likelihood of declines, and even just with PIN debit cards. Those go through a normal reconciliation process with the PIN debit network. So PIN debit charges when they go through authorization, they do settle even if the batch hasn't settled. So it's our job to make sure that we get the correct transaction information to you to sign off on so that we then can submit it to make sure that there's no duplicates in PIN debit transactions, that we're not, settling EBT more than once, things of that nature. So we handle it very delicately, and rushing it doesn't work because it does go into a queue of other rekey cases that only one team at the processor works on. And they're a basically after hour crew that is going to spend all night pulling transactions and making sure the cardholder data is accurate, and then submitting the transactions for either a forced using the same auth code or new transactions, and then having to go and check and make sure that everything actually settled correctly and then provide that information back to us. So we can't really rush that process. It's that lengthy for a reason, because of the intricacy and the nuance that's going on with the data. So we want to make sure that it's as accurate as possible to avoid further chargebacks, declines, things of that nature. Pricing changes and fee removal. So these are always going to happen at the end of the month, or beginning of the month of the next month. So usually within the first 5 business days of the new month. And we can do something in an immediate circumstance if there's a legitimate reason, like you literally just boarded the merchant and you realize that there's 2 sets of pricing on the application. So they're going to be charged 2 times their flat rate. And we want to make sure that we get ahead of that as soon as possible. So those are circumstances where we can rush it and we can have it taken care of immediately. Or if, we're about to do a large rekey and we want to take away their chargeback fee or something, maybe the partner wants to cover the chargebacks for the merchant because it was a internal issue that occurred. That's something where we can request that that fee be deducted or removed as quickly as possible so that we can move forward with the rekey and not have to deal with the aftermath of refunding fees. So keep that in mind. Also, adding specific card types. So like WEX and Voyager, those are fleet cards that are actually completed through a third party. So once it gets into their hands, they are the ones that have control over it, and they're the ones that are reviewing the documentation. This isn't something where our connection to the processor or even our own abilities will be able to move this quicker, because now a different company is the one who's handling it and it's their company. So they're going to go through the due diligence themselves. So we can always request updates and follow through as much as possible, but actually rushing it is going to take a little longer to actually get completed. Risk and compliance. So, we, especially my team, we see it a lot where a risk review comes through and the first thought process is to just be like, nope, we're not providing anything. That does not work. There's going to be times where maybe an exception can be made because it is an error on the processor's end, or maybe the information has already been provided and we can try to work around it. But again, that's going to be a time of an exception, not the rule. So unfortunately, ignoring or refusing to be a part of a risk review and providing those risk the risk documentation that's being requested can lead to an escalated consequence for the merchant. So that if the merchant hasn't already been placed on a funding hold for the review, it can lead to a funding hold. If they're really outright just completely refusing and the situation in the review is based on fraudulent suspicions and wanting to understand what the exposure is, they can very easily terminate the account because they're trying to protect their risk exposure as well. So keeping that in mind, if it's a merchant that's legitimate and actually functioning legitimate, do your best to communicate that to them. Do your best to try to educate them on the situation and have them buy in, as opposed to letting them kind of take the lead. There's going to be times where we get it. You really don't want to provide what we're asking for. Let's have a conversation. If you need assistance, request assistance from my team. We're happy to be on the phone with merchants and let them know why this is needed. They might still, disagree, but at least they're hearing it from someone else, that if they don't provide this information, it could lead to a funding hold, a account termination, whatever the case may be. So if you need to utilize this, definitely utilize this. Now, in a risk inquiry review situation, there are times where exceptions can be made. There are times where alternative documentation can be provided. So sometimes, we have a brand new merchant, they don't have bank statements that they can provide. They don't have a way of being able to communicate how their banking is functioning. Well, maybe we just take screenshots of their bank activity, right? Something to show us what the balance is when it was boarded. Maybe getting a bank letter to have a bank vouch for the health and safety of a merchant's bank account, something along those lines. And then in circumstances of, let's say, cardholder information, we've had circumstances where the cardholder information is actually, law enforcement, or we've actually created a new process with the risk department where medical facilities, they want to be HIPAA compliant. They don't want to provide cardholder information. So there are workarounds for that as well. So ignoring the request is definitely going to lead to further issues. Working with us to try to find an alternative will definitely help. We see it a lot where we'll request documentation. The merchant basically takes a week or two to come back. You guys keep trying, we keep trying, everyone's trying to get what we need to close out the review. And then they finally provide it and they're like, okay, and we want the hold released right now. And that's unfortunately not how it works. Now the documentation that's provided does need to be reviewed and approved in order to move forward. So kind of setting those expectations from the beginning will help as well. Now, for compliance, it's a little different because basically if we can't provide proof of compliance, then it's considered non-compliant. So if we say, yep, look at what they're doing, it's compliant, move along, that's never going to be okay, because compliance really comes from a card brand regulation situation. So if they're saying that a merchant's terminal is not allowing for contactless payments for debit transactions, then that's something that needs to be proven. We need to be able to show that a contactless transaction went through on a terminal and it was approved for a debit card. So making sure that if it's compliant, that we're providing proof of compliance. Otherwise, that just taking our word is not something that the card brands are willing to do, because then why would they be trying to enforce rules and regulations if they just took everyone's word for it? It definitely wouldn't go well. But this is another circumstance where if we just ignore it and pretend like it's not going to happen, in compliance world, fines escalate. So it starts out with, okay, you're getting $1,000. All right, now you've missed the deadline, so you're getting a $5,000 fine. Okay, now you've missed the deadline, you're refusing to cooperate, and we're still getting information about how non-compliant you are. Now it's $25,000, and that will break a small business. We don't want that. So work with us, try to gain the knowledge and the education. If we need to talk to the merchant directly, we can do that as well. But making sure that we're all on the same page for a compliance situation will make sure that we are not having to deal with that escalated fee and fine situation. All right, so support utilization. This is support from any team. This is POS support, client services support, risk and compliance support, partner relationship support. Doesn't matter where you're looking to get support for something. There are some ways in order to be able to communicate that we will be able to help you much quicker and much more efficiently with the correct information. So starting a fresh email thread. So there are times where we get a request to a closed case that is for either a different situation or the same merchant, but not really the same issue. And there's going to be times where you're replying to a closed case because the issue we just said is solved is not solved, and you want to get back to that. That's definitely fine to do that. I definitely understand the thought process there. Some circumstances, the email will actually get bounced back. So we want to make sure that you're getting the support that you need. So even in a circumstance where you've already received a notification that something's completed, maybe just start a new thread just to say, hey, I just worked on this. I need this taken care of immediately. Or calling in saying, hey, I was just working with somebody on this and it hasn't been fixed. Anything like that will help speed up the process so that we're not losing that communication somewhere along the way. Also, if you have basically a long thread of contacts, maybe you and the merchant or you and your support team have kind of gone back and forth several times and you're just kind of gathering data the entire time, sending that long thread of a bunch of different conversations, we now have to sit through and decipher every single bit of it, because we'll sometimes get emails that are just saying like, hey, please see below. Right. And so now we're taking a weeks long information email thread where everybody has had their 2 cents in there. And we're trying to decipher what it is that's being said, what it is that's needed. And then now we're having to follow back up to confirm what's needed. Whereas if you can forward the thread if you want to for further context, but having a summary in the middle that at the top that just says, hey, I've been speaking with my support team and this person and the merchant, and we are at a point where we don't know where to go from here. This is what we're trying to do. This is what we've tried already. This is what hasn't worked so far. That way we're able to take that information, and now if we have further questions, we can follow up. But now we kind of already have a narrative and a story that we can move forward with, and it'll help you kind of gain traction on it just a little quicker. One issue per email. So sometimes we'll see people just kind of bundle merchants and issues together. And so it's like, well, this merchant is getting charged for PCI compliance. This merchant needs a chargeback letter. This merchant needs to add a tip. This merchant is dealing with a bank change, and all of it's just kind of in one email. So what we have to do in order to make sure that things are being completed correctly is we then have to split that into 4 or 5 different cases and then divvy it out. So just in that time alone, you're kind of having that be put into the hands of another team and another person's interpretation of the request. So one issue per mid. If you have one mid that has multiple issues that are like kind of correlated together, hey, their tips aren't working on this terminal. These are the tips that need to be rekeyed. We kind of need this to be taken care of, as soon as possible because it is leading to chargebacks or whatever the case may be. If it's one issue that has multiple parts, then we can work on that to figure out where that needs to go. But allowing that determination from your side will help make it clearer for us so that we can work on it quicker. And then engaging the whole team. We all know that there's places that we go where we have our favorites to talk to, or they're just people that get stuff done, and we just want to have them to hold our hand through it, whatever the case may be, just to make sure that everything goes smoothly. Having that one specific person basically bottlenecks your situation into someone that might not have the opportunity to help that day or that at that moment. They might be on vacation, right? They might be away from their desk or out of office for a little while. And if they do get your email or the request to that one person, let's say late in the day on a Tuesday, but then they're going to be off from Wednesday to Monday, that's going to be a time where your request is just going to kind of be sitting there with somebody who's not looking at it. Whereas submitting something to an entire team, having someone else have eyes on it. Now, if that person's not available, they can try to see if there's someone else that can help. And there could even be a circumstance where they're all in the same office. Our Atlanta team is all in the same office. So if you're trying to reach a specific person on that team, even if you send it to the entirety, if someone else gets that case and is able to say, hey, hey, Stephanie, or hey, so-and-so, I'm not in the Atlanta office, don't ask for me there. But if someone is saying that if you need somebody, they can walk over to their desk and say, hey, I got this case from so-and-so. They're asking about this. They requested you directly, but if there's any way I can help, please let me know what I can do. Now they're able to verbalize it in person. And so you're still getting that person's help just through somebody else. And now that person's learning as well. So it helps the team build their knowledge so that we're all having a few more resources to work with as opposed to just relying on that one person. And then capacity, right? There's some teams that are really big and some teams that are really small. And so if you're requesting a lot from the one team, they might not be able to deliver as quickly. Or, there have been times where, there's a large group of one team that is out of office for the holidays or for this or for that. And we have enough staff on to help, but it is lessened. So just kind of allowing that ability to, not get an immediate turnaround, but understanding that there's going to be a time frame to get what it is that you need. So just having some patience with that will allow the emergencies to be dealt with as emergencies and then everything else to be dealt with in the time that we have already allotted for it. And then last is going to be closures and inactivity. So basically inactive accounts, right? We have a lot of circumstances where maybe a merchant is reapt onto a new mid for a pricing situation or fraudulent situation or what have you, or they just stopped processing and they've moved to a different processor and no one's really aware of it. But kind of keeping tabs on your portfolio to make sure that any inactive accounts are being closed as quickly as possible will help with, first of all, fraud exposure. So an inactive account that no one is paying attention to, it's a great place for a bad actor to go settle in and start testing some cards and figuring things out. So removing that access will help with having to deal with any type of fraud exposure, card testing, and like emergency action on this merchant's account. And also rejected fees. So if a merchant who's no longer processing, but still getting recurring monthly fees and then starts ACH rejecting it, now, first off, you're going to get a notification about that. If we never close the account and we never get confirmation to close the account, that fee is just going to keep getting tried every single month. And we're going to keep having ACH rejects until eventually they close the account. And the way that the processor works is that if there is a fee that hasn't been collected, you don't get paid for that fee. You don't get the residuals for that fee if it hasn't been paid for. So basically, a negative credit will be passed along to the partner's residuals for the fact that what you're supposed to be owed for this fee was not paid for to the processor, so you don't get paid what you're owed for it as well. So by closing accounts as soon as they're ready to be closed, even only a month later or whatever the case may be, will help you all reduce those non-liability adjustments as well, because now these accounts aren't being dinged every single month. You just have a closed account and no one's making any money anyway. So let's just close it out so that we're not losing money on it. And then ETF communication. So early termination fees. If you're going to close an account and you know that there's an early termination fee on the account, communicate it, because to my knowledge, if we close an account, it'll just automatically apply an early termination fee if it's there. If you don't want it to be because you already have this account maybe with a different relationship, or maybe we just moved them to a new mid for something, communicating that early termination fee should not be applied will help us get through that process quicker to close the account. So just keeping that in mind. All right, so we have a question from Andrew about finding a paper application for customers so that they can provide the information that they need to fill out their application online. All right, I will make sure that we have the exact copies that we need for that, and I will send that over. I'll have somebody either from our partner experience team, or from, if you have a growth manager, we'll make sure that gets over to you. Otherwise, I do know that through the processor, there is a community docs page. I don't know if they have an application in there, but we will make sure that we get that for you. So I will have someone send that to you. But thank you all for joining today. It was a pleasure. I hope you got something out of this, and we hope to see you next time.
Bold Bytes, your bite-sized guide to payments.